So just to show you again, you've got the greater wing of the sphenoid, and then you've got this downward pointing process, the pterygoid process, and then you've got the little hook, which is the hamulus, the lateral medial plate, and you've got the body of the sphenoid connecting in between. So I'm just going to switch to a view. This is a view inside the cranium. So this now is the body of the sphenoid, and this here is the greater wing. So if I just show you from outside, the greater wing on the outside, and then from the inside, this is where the greater wing is. And now you can see the lesser wings. So it's not actually that clear here, but the lesser wing of the sphenoid is here. And then just anterior to the lesser wings you have the ethmoid bone, which again isn't very clear, but I'll just point that out quickly. So the ethmoid bone here, you've got this little process pointing outwards, which is the crista galli, and then you've got the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone around here, and you can't see it on here because it's not very clear, but you've got little tiny holes in the cribriform plate where small branches of the nerves from the olfactory nerve penetrate through. So that's the ethmoid bone, and just posterior you have the lesser wing of the sphenoid, and then this is the body of the sphenoid. So just where I showed you the greater wing, which is lateral to the body of the sphenoid, you've got these depressions, and this is where the temporal lobe of the brain sits. So I'll just show you where the temporal lobe sits. So this is just lateral to the body over here, and if I bring in the brain, you can see how it sits in that depression lateral to the body. So this is looking at the body from a lateral view. So we just looked at it from here, and now I'm just rotating around laterally, and you can see this little hollowing. So this is called the hypophyseal fossa, and this is where the pituitary gland sits. So the whole structure, including this little lump, this little protrusion, is known as the sella turcica. So this anterior wall is called the tuberculum sellae, and this posterior wall is called the dorsum sellae, and collectively this makes up the sella turcica. And this little ditch is the hypophyseal fossa, where the pituitary gland sits. So if I show you that, you can just see the pituitary gland, the pituitary stalk, sitting in that little fossa. So the word fossa just means ditch in Latin, so this thing just looks like a ditch. So just to quickly recap, you've got the body of the sphenoid, the greater wings, you've got the lesser wings, and then you've got the pterygoid processes, which stick out down here, pointing inferiorly. The pterygoid processes. So that's the sphenoid. So finally you've got the occipital bone, which is this bone at the back of the skull, and it consists of 4 parts. This squamous part, which is this flat bit at the back, 2 lateral parts, which sit either side of the foramen magnum, which is this big hole here where the spinal cord comes up into the skull and becomes the brainstem. And then you've got this bit here, which is the basilar part, just anterior to the foramen magnum. So you've got the 2 lateral parts either side of the foramen magnum, the basilar part, which is anterior to the foramen magnum, and the squamous part at the back, which is the flat bit. So just a few things to point out. Quite noticeable is this big bump here, which is the external occipital protuberance. And then you've got the nuchal lines, the superior nuchal lines and the inferior nuchal lines. And if you look inferiorly, you've got this little raised bit of bone, which is the external occipital crest. And then the last bit to mention is these things here, which are the occipital condyles, and these articulate with the first vertebra, the atlas. So if I just show you that, you can see here the atlas bone articulating with the occipital condyles. So that's the bones that make up the Calvaria. The next tutorial will be on the facial skeleton, so the bones of the skull which make up the facial skeleton.